Yo,
All right, we're rolling.
funny.
All right, cool.
Got it.
All right. What's going on, everybody? It's Marty,
YP, what up?
and we're here talking about life, talking about everything. It's my privilege. If you don't know who I am, first off, if you don't know who I am, I'm an artist, I'm a producer, I own Apollo Records. And luckily, I was able to be a part of this project, connecting dots and kind of overseeing it. I'm really proud of this new record we got coming out.
Yeah.
And so I just want to do some questions with my boy YP, get to know him a little bit better, and we have some questions from the audience. Well, I just made that up, but we don't have any questions for the audience, but I want to know more about him. And so we're going to cut this, it'll be clips, but this is the overview of the whole thing, and we're excited to be here. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome YP. We're going to add some behind you when we do that. Let me take this over here. Let me put this over here.
All right.
Yeah. All right. So my first question is this.
Yes.
All right. How did you even get into hip hop? Tell us about what's your first experience with hip hop?
Yeah, so I was a big fan of like Dipset, Deluxe, Dipset, Eminem. I think I was very intrigued by M's wordplay, you know, his syllable game. Dipset, I think I was intrigued just by like their whole aura, you know, the fashion, the Jim Jones ad-libs, you know, they embody New York City,
Yeah.
you know, and then the locks, the grittiness, you know, the bars, Jadakiss, Legend, Nas, you know, Illmatic, one of my favorite albums to this day, Jay-Z, The Blueprint. So yeah, you know, being tapped DMX, you know, being tapped into those guys, you know, made me fall in love with hip hop.
I love that.
Yeah.
So where are you from?
So I was born and raised in Jersey City, and then I lived in West New York and Union City, bounced around Hudson County, New Jersey. Now I live in the South Bronx. I've been in the Bronx for 10 years now. I was over on Prospect, you know, now I'm between Ryder and Park in the South Bronx, you know. So yeah, very East Coast.
Fat Joe's from there. You got
Yeah,
some
shout out to
legends
Fat Joe. Oh,
over
Big
there.
Pun.
Big Pun.
How could I not mention Big Pun, man?
Yeah.
Big Pun is definitely an inspiration.
Big Pun is out
Capital
there.
Punishment classic album, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, and so growing up, you know, what is the difference right now from when you were getting into hip hop to what we see now? Like, what's the difference in terms? Because it's really hard sometimes to explain to people getting excited about a release. Like I think about DMX and like when he would announce an album, we were pumped.
Facts.
And like we were waiting for that. Nowadays, you know, music goes so much quicker. Like what's how can we explain to some of these young people like what it felt like to live through the Dipset era? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like the paper towel era of
The paper
they don't
towel.
even understand.
The paper
so how
towel,
do we? How do
we
you,
definitely did that. We definitely wrapped the paper towels around our heads. But yeah, I think in that era, in that time, music videos were popping. So you know, that's what got us hyped about the records. The CDs, just having a CD physically in hand. You know, being able to take the cover out, reading like who produced what, who wrote what, and the features, and just having that. Now it would be merch, but at the time it was like, yo, this is
just smelling it.
Yeah,
you know, like those
yeah.
little things
It's like
matter.
a pair of new kicks. You know what I'm saying? Out the box.
The
you
full
know?
experience.
Yeah,
of it.
yeah.
I
Facts,
love that.
Facts.
How'd you get into Christian music?
Yeah.
How did that start? And then who was your earliest influence that was like, oh, there actually is
For sure.
rappers that are Christian?
For sure. So obviously I became a believer, and I didn't know about Christian hip hop at the time. And the guys that kind of, you know, took me under the wing were bumping Christian hip hop, specifically the Cray at the time.
Oh wow, yeah.
His older stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I didn't even know that there was a lane for that. And then as I started digging in more, I got put on to guys like Corey Red and Precise. And like I explained to you, my inspiration or my influences were Jadakiss, Styles P, Sheik Luch, Nas, and them guys. Corey Red and them guys kind of brought that vibe, you know what I mean? That street, gritty, raw. They were saying stuff that I wasn't hearing a lot of Christian rappers say, especially Corey Red. So I was like, yo, I could connect with this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Also, shout out to my man Jay Silas out of Philly.
Yeah.
He had a mixtape called No Excuses, I think.
I had that.
Yeah, with
I got
DJ
on
Hudson.
MySpace.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And those guys embodied, like, I was into Cassidy, you know, at the time. Cassidy was putting out classic mixtapes and freestyles. So I feel like Jay Silas gave me that Philly mixtape vibe.
Yeah.
So them guys, you know, I was heavy into that at the time. You know what I'm saying?
Got it. So you heard Christian music and you were like, oh, they rap, they're Christian.
Right.
Did you ever feel like they just, you know, like I always feel like there's this negative thought process where people are like, he just doesn't get it though. Like, I know you're rapping for God, but you don't know the stuff we've been through. You know, did you ever feel like there was a disconnect between the mainstream and the Christian hip hop for you? Like, did you ever feel like, you know, you look at artists like Jadakiss, and there's only one Jay Silas, there's only one Corey Red. It's a lot less. But do you ever feel like those guys are good examples of like street grittiness?
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like there's a disconnect where I'm like, these new guys, like, I don't think you understand what it felt like to be in the world that we were in. Like, you can't relate to a Big Pun, you know, it's a different. So I definitely feel, you know, like there is that. But do you ever feel like there is a disconnect right now between the mainstream and the Christian world of hip hop?
As far as quality,
I think my question is like quality, but also like message. Like, sometimes I don't really, and this is, I mean, I'm speaking a little bit too much, but sometimes I just don't believe. I'm like, I don't, like, you ever heard those shirts back in the day where it was like, I went to your hood and nobody knew you? Like, I almost feel like sometimes I hear rappers and I'm like, they don't get it. Like, you know, for me, you're the type of artist that really cares about what you say, how you say it.
Right.
And it's not just you trying to just, you know, impress your friends. Like, this is a mission that you do.
Facts.
And so sometimes I feel like there is not only a quality decrease, but in terms of like realness. Like, for instance, Fern is like went to prison, went through the whole system. My boy Fern, he went through the prison system. So I'm like, he has such an authentic story. And in mainstream, you really had to have the authentic story. You're gonna get called out. Do you ever feel like there is like I do feel like you are one of a million.
100.
So I do feel like, how do you? I can't relate to many people who, like, they don't see through your perspective. You know, like, you're one of a kind. Like, you are, to me, in the Fat Joe, Big Pun. You could be there. And I don't know what I don't know a Christian guy. I don't know another Christian artist that I could bunch them in with. You know what I'm saying? So for me, I almost feel like, you know, for you, you have such a specific, cool style that maybe you and Fern could be over here, but people just don't connect. So do you ever feel like, we need to get Fern on record.
Let's do it.
But do you ever feel like the message that we have suffers a little bit in the space of gritty hip hop?
Facts. You know, you hit it right on the nail, because sometimes that's my biggest frustration. Because I see guys rapping about certain things and they trying their hardest to sound a certain way, but it doesn't come authentic through the music. Like, I can't connect with it because I'm like, I feel like it's gimmicky. You know what I'm saying? You know, I come from the trenches for real. Like, I've been through things. You know? Like, I've gotten stabbed. You know, I ran around my hood. People in my hood knew me for getting it popping. You know, it's not fabricated. You know, you go to my hood, my old block, and you can ask people I used to run around with. They're gonna confirm these stories, and you can hear it in the music. It's authentic. You know, and I don't want to like sound like I'm glorifying it, because I don't even like talking like that. But like, since we're on the topic, the reason why people, when they hear my music and they feel like it's authentic, is because I really live these things. And I've been around people that have done worse than I have. You know, I put in one of the records on the album. You know, one of my boys, you know, rest in peace. You know, he got shot in his spine. He was in a wheelchair. You know, like, we really been through stuff like I said, I got stabbed in my back. My guys have done prison time, stuff like that. So not only was, you know, I in the mix, but a lot of my people I was surrounded by were in the trenches and living that lifestyle. I was always around drug dealers and, you know, stick-up kids and all of this stuff. You know what I'm saying? So in the music, I'm able to paint these pictures vividly because I was actually in there. You know, I feel like my whole life I've been in different ghettos. You know, born in Jersey City on Communipaw, that's on the hill, that's the ghetto side of Jersey City. Then, you know, whatever town I was living in, I was always running around with the quote-unquote bad kids. You know, I live in the South Bronx right now, so it's just part of my life, you know, so it just comes authentic through the music. You know, and I feel like some guys, they're trying to catch a wave because they see, oh, this gritty sound's popping right now, or, you know, people are embracing it. Let me try to get in that lane, and it's like, it doesn't connect because you know, you really weren't a part of that.
We don't believe you.
We don't believe
more
you.
people.
We need more people. Shout out to
I think right now it's funny because we're in like a resurgence of that, like Dipset. Always gonna be popping. You know, Little Baby, one of the biggest rappers, he's going to Harlem to shoot with Joel's, to shoot with Cameron.
Paying homage.
And so, you know, it's full circle moments are starting to happen now. Like Jim Jones is still very popular. You know, and so I think you to me are a piece of that history.
Word.
And so when I think of Christian hip hop, you have Lecrae in Atlanta, who's from Houston.
Yeah, shout out to
A lot,
Lecrae.
shout out to Lecrae. You got a lot of artists in Atlanta. There aren't a lot of artists from New York that get a pop, and maybe I could probably say like Dayton's crew
Yeah, shout out to
really
Dayton.
have that too.
Word.
But for the most part, that gritty hip hop is something that we're missing. I think that we need it
Yeah.
more.
No, and I want to say shout out to you, Marty, because I love the fact that you coming into the trenches like, come on, guys, I'm gonna help y'all out. Let's get it
Yeah,
popping.
I feel
You know
like
what
I'm
I
the
mean?
Kanye West in it. Like,
Yeah.
I was the kid growing up
Word.
where I grew up with some wild family members and
Yeah,
some
yeah.
wild friends.
Yeah.
But I also, it's funny. It's like a lot of my friends grew up without parents, without moms or dads.
Yeah.
So it was like one parent. And so I had both parents. My friends would hang out at my house. 'Cause
Yeah.
they'd be like, yo, my mom is your mom. That was
right.
the connection we had.
Yeah.
But a lot of my friends in prison time, like you, a lot of my friends, and I don't know if it's maybe like how we grew up in Florida, but like, Puerto Ricans, we always hung out together. You know what I'm
Word
saying?
up, word up.
And some of my boys were just very, very wild. And so
Yeah.
I love that. I think that, it's interesting because when I think about Christian music, it's like the body of Christ. We need different perspectives
Come on.
for it to fully be understood.
That's a
You know,
fact.
what was your experience for you when it came to like just finding out about God? Did your family grow up in the church? Like, how did you have the experience with God?
All right, so I want to answer that, but can I rewind a little
Yeah,
bit?
let's go.
Because you said something that was interesting as far as like the sound, the gritty sound in Christian hip hop. I would always have conversations with my guy C4, Katona, shout out to my man C4, and I would always tell him like, yo, bro, this sound that we do, we got to sharpen it, stick to it, stay with it, because I feel like that's what's lacking in this space. Especially at that time, Griselda arose, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Griselda came out and they were popping. And then from Griselda, you have 38 Special, and then Ransom got new life. And it was like a renaissance, like that sound.
Conductor.
Yeah, Conductor.
Yeah,
shout out to Conductor. That sound. Didn't Drake just put out like an EP with him or something like that?
Drake, I mean, that's how big that
Yeah.
Griselda movement is right
Exactly.
now. That it's, and like there's other artists that are working, like you have, what's his name, just dropped a brand new song randomly, but MGK did a Conductor beat, like
Okay.
it's starting to hit like pop,
Yeah,
pop, you know?
So with that being said, so let's be clear. I've always been doing this type of sound before I even knew about Griselda. But it just so happens that they started a boom in the industry and it benefited guys like us.
Yeah.
Because that's like Marty was saying, that's why it sound authentic, because we stood true to a sound, even when it wasn't popular.
Yeah.
Even when it wasn't popping, we were still doing gritty raps
Yeah.
and rapping over boom bap, East Coast instrumentals. So it's organic.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like now that sound is kind of catching fire again. Guys like us could benefit off of it because we've been doing this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You could go down the rabbit hole and you'll see that. You'll hear it or whatever. So I would always tell C4 like, yo, we gotta stick to that sound because there's gonna be believers that love the Dipsets, that love the Mobb Deeps. I forgot to shout out Mobb Deep. Shout out Mobb Deep. Mobb Deep and the MOPs and the Locks and all of that. That love Jesus and they want to hear that type of hip hop, but for Jesus. You know what I'm saying? But that raw, authentic. You know what I mean? Nothing like gimmicky or whatever. And that's what I feel like that's what I bring to the table, and a lot of my guys do.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? We bring that sound, that essence, that authenticity. Like,
Yeah.
yo, and I know my demographic. I know my guy.
Yeah.
I know I reach, the dudes who like to pump weights in the gym.
Yeah.
Dudes that love 90s hip hop. I know my demo. Some young guys will listen to it because they still like lyricism or whatever. But make a long story short, I felt like that sound was missing, and I remember, talking to my guys like, yo, we gotta stick to this sound because it's needed in this space, man.
Yeah, and
You know what I'm
I'll say this just to add on that. When I think about all right, so when I first heard Dipset or when I heard DMX, it's not kids music. And I think that in
That's
Christian
right.
music,
That's right.
we're so used to, I think especially in Christian hip hop, there's such a catering to a younger demographic
Yeah.
just to get shows.
Yeah.
And you guys don't don't cater and like try to make it fit for you are who you
Right,
are.
right,
And that's
exactly.
what I love.
Yeah.
That's one thing I love about Christian hip hop is that like it shouldn't, I love guys like we need a Forrest Frank and we need the Holbies.
Yeah.
But growing up, those weren't the guys I'm gonna listen to.
Right, right.
Like listening to Dipset, like I remember having to hide that from my parents,
Yeah.
because it's like the language
Right,
on it.
right,
And
right.
the other day I'm driving with my nephews and I put on Forrest Frank because I can't listen to my music's not for kids either.
Right,
And
right.
I think that there is a huge demographic for people who like authentic hip hop
Yeah.
with a good message. We're just finding them out, though.
Right.
We're still trying to find that demographic.
Right.
They exist.
Yeah.
I think Griselda proved that. Hey, there is a market for it. It just people need to number one put the time and consistency,
Yeah.
but like actually go after it. You know.
Right.
And I think when it comes to street hip hop, it's a lot. It's more of a niche, specific person you're looking for.
That's right.
And it's not a kid. It's not going to be a 12-year-old. He's not going to understand what we're talking about,
Right.
and that's okay. I think there's a power in knowing who you don't reach
Yeah.
and knowing who you want to reach. Because if you just try to reach everybody,
Yeah.
it's just this, like if every ice cream store just sold vanilla, it's like how boring is that? You
Right.
need different, you need other churches.
Yeah.
You can't just have one church.
Right.
Multiple churches reach different people, and I feel like
That's right.
what you do
Yeah.
is so needed.
Yeah.
And people who are going to hear your music, they're going to be the guys who are working out, like the Beast Mode playlist,
yeah.
the hip hop enthusiasts. Like
Yeah.
there's a huge
The
market
underground
for that.
boom bap lovers. Yeah.
And even now, I was watching something the other day where Benny the Butcher.
Yeah.
And there's a hashtag going around where it's like pretty girls like underground hip hop or something like that. And it's like these girls are like, they're even the other day there was a K-pop band that put on hats and chains and did the 50 Cent.
Okay.
But that wasn't. We never catered for those to be for 8-year-olds and 12-year-olds and 16.
Right.
This is for people who I would say 18 through and up,
That's
who
right.
want to hear good music with a quality to it. And I feel like that's what you bring.
Yeah.
So what was your experience with God like? What was your first experience like? Receiving God, going to church. How did that look like for you?
Yeah, man. So I always tell people when God was, tugging at my heart, the way that happened was like in like slideshows, like in clips. If I could explain it. So, for example, I was on a train one time, just sitting by myself, and this dude randomly walks up to me. He's like, "Look, I know you don't know me. I know it's gonna be a little awkward, but God moved in my heart to speak to you." Right? Then there was another situation in Jersey City by Journal Square. I almost got into a situation with some kid, and this lady walks up to me, and she starts, just in the middle of the chaos. Me and this kid about to get busy, and she comes in the middle of the chaos, and she's like, "God has a calling over your life. What are you doing?" So like little stuff like that. And I remember getting on the bus with her, so she prevented that from going left, because she got in the middle, and she's telling me like God has a calling over your life. And while we're on the bus, I'm just heated, and she starts worshiping right behind me. She starts singing to God. So stuff like that. And then one of my men sees, shout out to him, he would always see me and minister to me. Always. Every time he see me. Like I'll be with like all my guys. We'll be maybe 30 deep, walking around. And he'll come up to me, and sometimes I'll try to make my friends listen, like, "Yo, y'all gotta hear what he's spitting, yo." You know what I mean? And so stuff like that, like a lot of seeds were being planted. And eventually, shout out to my man Chove, another one, I walked into a church one time, because I eventually gave in. I was like, man, I gotta go see what he's all about. And I seen him, and he looked transformed. Last time I seen him, he was missing a tooth. He had long braids. I see him now; he has a perfect smile. He got a gel in his hair and all that. But he was shining. I'm like, yo. He's like, yo, I'm so happy to see you. Give me a big hug, and he's like, yo, man, Jesus saved my life. So like these seeds were being planted by all these different people, man. It's like God was just calling me, and eventually, man, I came before him. I'm like, God, if you're the God that they say you are, I'm addicted to this. I like doing this, but according to them, this is all rebellious. And this isn't right with you. So, if you're the God that they say you are, I need you to really supernaturally come into my life and help me to get to know you. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like he heard that prayer, and that's, from there, just kind of building with them. And my man Chova kind of took me under the wing and, put me on, started reading scripture with me. I started going to church with him. And that's how it pretty much happened, man. I was like, man, this is where I got to be. This is where it's at.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I have a funny story with that. While I'm being drove to church, I passed by my block, and my man Mac, rest in peace to my man Mac, he sees me in the car. They haven't seen me in a while. They hear me that I'm going to church. For whatever reason, the door was unlocked. He opens. He's like, "Yo, what are you doing, Hank? Where are you going?" And I'm like, "Yo, go to church." He's like, "Nah, man, we your family. You know what I mean? What do you mean? What's going on here?" And I'm like, "Nah, bro, I'm going to church." He's like, "All right, man." It's funny stories like that. It's like so many like different situations, and rest in peace. He's not here with us no more, but that's like a highlight for me. I remember him opening the door like, nah, come on. I'm like, nah, bro, I'm staying. Man. This is where I'm at now.
Yeah.
He's like, yo, we your family.
Yeah.
You gonna forget it? I'm like, nah, I love y'all. I'm coming back for y'all.
Yeah.
But this is where I'm at now. You
Wow.
know?
Yeah. For you, when you first started hearing about God, how was that transition from being this wild young kid, just going wild and you know, smacking people and just being young in New York is what it is, in Jersey. And how is the transition from you being like, all right, I love God now, and now it's transforming me, but like, what was that transition like? Because for me, I know for a fact it was difficult. You know, like it's a lot of trial and error. I remember I would do things and people would pull me aside and be like, you can't do that.
That's right.
You know, and I'm sorry, I didn't know. I didn't know I was like, I wasn't, you know, I didn't know we weren't supposed to say F the devil. I'm sorry. I thought we hated him, you know, that guy. But I think about stuff like that. Like I had friends of mine who were in Miami and they were Puerto Ricans, you know how it is. A lot of my friends were in Latin Kings and they were all little gangsters. We were all like 17 and you know, none of my friends really had dads. And so they looked to certain people who were older
to be that father,
to be
figure.
that dad. And so I like the same way a couple of my friends, they had that, like, your friend grabs you, opens the door, holds you, we're your family. I think for me when I was young, I would hear that and feel so much like I want to be with them, but I know God's calling me, and there's like this internal struggle.
Oh yeah.
What was that like for you, the transition? Because I think that I think that we always talk about the testimony in a nice, sweet way, but it's tough.
Oh,
you know,
absolutely.
and transitioning out of that. How was that for you as a believer, becoming a believer in that process?
Yeah. So as you're saying that, one story comes to mind, or one situation comes to mind. When my man Javier was inviting me to go to the Bible studies and church and stuff like that, we had set a day. He was like, yo, we have Bible studies on Tuesdays, why don't you pull up? And I had like this really religious mindset where I'm thinking church is only on Sundays. I'm like, why you want me to pull up on a Tuesday? You know what I'm saying?
That's funny.
And this happens to be one of those nice days, you know, like when it's winter, but you have one of those nice days in New York or Jersey, whatever, where it's like 80 degrees and everybody want to pop out.
No one's inside.
No one's inside. So it's Tuesday, everybody's outside, and I'm like, dang, y'all told my man I was gonna go to church, but I'm not feeling like I want to go to church right now. And make a long story short, he calling me, and I'm in the hoopty with my guys, and I'm like, yo, I don't know if I want to go, but they're like, yo, just don't pick up. You know what I'm saying? He's calling me, don't pick up. I'm like, nah, I ain't gonna do that tonight. So I pick up, I'm like, so I'm not going today. And he was like, what? Oh, come on, man. I thought you were going to come. What's going on? He's like, where you at? Let's meet up.
Oh.
So I'm on the phone with him, and I'm telling my boys, I'm like, yo, let's at least meet up with him. I feel bad. I'm already curving them. And they're like, come on, heck, man, kill all that. Yo, it's a beautiful day, yo. Let's go ahead and tell me, you know, we get some shorties, get some bottles, let's go kick it. And I'm like, nah, yo, let me meet up with him for 5 minutes. They were like, all right, dad, let's go. So we meet up with him. And instantly he's like, yo, you forgot about what I preached to you about, what we spoke about? You know, God got a calling over your life. You know, he starts telling me, you know, heaven and hell is real. You know, God forbid you die today. Da, da, da. And I'm like, dang, yo, like, God wasn't letting me go. God's like, nah, we don't got time for tomorrow. I need you right now. So that tug of war you're talking about, I remember, like, literally, it was a tug of war. He was like, yo, what's up, man? Just come to Bible studies with me. And my boys are looking at me like, you gonna go? You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, for a moment there, I'm like, oh man, I want to go with them. It's beautiful outside. You know what I mean? I want to go kick
struggle.
It. Yeah, but I'm like, I know I've been praying about this. I know God. You know that quiet time when it's just you and God. You know those tears that you shed, and you start telling God like, yo, I want to be better. I want to do better, and all of that. God's like, what? Let's go. Are we all talk or what? What's up? You know what I mean? Like, let's go. Let's do this now. And I remember I was like, I'm like, I'm gonna go. And it took everything in me. It was like literally like all right, let's go. And my boys looked at me, they're like, for real, heck? What? I'm like, yeah, bro, I'm gonna go with them. They're like, all right. They all dapped me up, and they bounce. Now I'm in the car with them, and they bumping Christian hip hop, and I'm in the back seat like, yo, what am I doing here? You know what I'm saying? I'm like, and they're like knowing the lyrics, they're reciting. I'm in the back seat like, yo, God, what am I doing, yo? Like, the demons, what am I have? And we get to the church, and my man could tell that I'm annoyed. Like, I did it, but everything in me is like, why did I just do this? You know what I mean? And my man's like, yo, look, I could tell, because I was like really like secluded. I was a little mad that I was there. I'm like, why'd I do this, yo? And he was like, look, I know you don't really want to be here, but you made the right decision. I'm telling you that right now. He said, why don't you tell God exactly how you feel? Be straight up with him, because he knows how you feel already. Just tell him straight up. He's like, yo, look, go pray, man. You want to go over there and pray by yourself between you and God. Why don't you talk to him? So I did it. I prayed, and what I just said before, I said that prayer. I'm like, you know, I said to God, I said, Lord, I don't want to be here. I'd rather be outside, kicking it, cooling. I don't want to be here. And I'm like, you know, but if you are the God that they say you are, I pray that you come into my heart and help me, you know, remove these things and understand you more and build this relationship. You know what I mean? And like I said, he did that. I feel like he heard that organic prayer, like it was from the heart. You know what I'm saying? It was genuine. It wasn't like gimmicky or fabricated or like, it was just from the heart. Like, God, I don't want to be here.
Yeah. Where do you think you would be if, let's reverse this, and that day you decided to be like, you know what, hang with my boys right now, and that was maybe a breaking point for you to be like, I'm not going to be involved as much. Once you make that choice, you kind of continue, you know, like for me, once I mess up, I'm like, let me continually, you know, it's easier to just continually do the same thing. For you, where do you see yourself? God forbid, you know, you didn't have God in your life, or you didn't have music to be something also where you can use it as a ministry. What do you think would have happened?
I know it's gonna sound cliche because everybody likes to say this, but I'd really be dead or in jail.
You do have a lot. I mean, because even now talking to you, there's people you're telling stories, but a lot of your friends growing up, kids that you love, you know, and even in the music you hear where you're talking about, you know, like these guys don't have. I have to tell their story. So for you, what do you think would have happened?
Well, the name of the project is I Shouldn't Be Here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah, I shouldn't be here. So I literally feel like I'd be dead or in jail. So I forget this part of my testimony a lot, but, and again, I'm not saying this to glorify nothing. It's just part of my life, you know. I was actually fighting 2 cases when I gave my life to Christ, and they were both violent charges, both aggravated assault charges. One was possession of a weapon, and the other one, you know, I'm not going to go into the details, but I was fighting those 2 cases, and by God's grace, you know, at the time, I started going to church, and my lawyer, you know, kicked up for me. I had to get a letter from my pastor at the time. I had to get a letter from my lawyer, pretty much explaining to the judge that I haven't been in trouble for this amount of time, and, you know, the felonies got dropped down to misdemeanors. Unfortunately, misdemeanors still show up. Or whatever, but they got dropped from felonies. You know what I mean? So that's why I said I really feel like I'd be dead or in jail, because I was spiraling down. You know, like, I feel like I'm a good dude. I feel like, you know, but I just made bad decisions. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Good kid, mad city. You know, you just
right.
It is,
right. You know, so you asked me, well, I feel like I'd be dead or in jail.
Yeah.
Straight up. Yeah.
I think it's and for me, you know, I think it's important that people understand the severity of who you were before. You know, we're not here to glorify that ever, but I want the listener to understand how real your story is. That, you know, I feel like in hip hop nowadays, people they're jokesters. They're not really who they say they are.
Yeah, right.
You know, it's like, you know, there's so many people me and Fern run into. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, this rapper we met is the nicest guy I ever met. I could not imagine, you know, he's tatted on his face. But there's some people we meet in the mainstream where I'm like, that guy can't be, you know, he can't be who he says in his rhymes. Right. And I think that our generation, like, and the younger generation, they want authenticity. That's right. And for me, I feel like you really have that. And that is, you know, the Bible says this: they overcame by the blood of the Lamb and the word of the testimony. Amen. You know, so I think we overcome by God, but we also get hope because there are other YPs out there that, you know, going wilding out with your boys. You know, and I laugh because when I watch certain vlogs and people in New York, I'm like, I know what that feels like. Yeah. I know what it feels like to get wrapped and get encouraged by people, and you almost become this person who it's like, I'm not, you know, it's like you, it's like, I was being torn between the 2 worlds, and you feel loyalty to your friends. Right. How was it trying to, did some of your friends end up going to church with you, but that loyalty there where it's like, hey, these guys got my back, but at the same time, I know what God has for me. What was it like with your friends at the time?
So at the time, a lot of my friends didn't understand it. So like in my neighborhood, you know, I was pretty popular. So the word around town was that I lost it, that I went crazy. You know what I'm saying? That I'm on some weirdo stuff because I started preaching to everybody. You know, like I remember there'll be times I was away from the scene for a little while, and just in this place of consecration where God was just teaching me scripture and I was just growing. and then I popped out again. And I remember there was moments where when I popped out, there'll be crowds around me, 30 to 40, dudes around me, hearing me testify about what Christ did in my life. You know what I'm saying? Like, I remember those nights vividly where I popped out and I got 40 to 30 dudes just like, yo, listening to my story. It's kind of crazy when I think about it, because at the moment I didn't understand the full impact.
Yeah.
But when I think back, and I'm like, wow, I was really, preaching in the middle of the hood to like 40 to 50 dudes who knew my story and respected me enough to stand there and listen to me. And it was several occasions where they'll see me, and then once I start talking, a crowd will surround me and everybody's just listening to me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it shows the respect that I had in my neighborhood, and it also shows the calling that God had over my life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So.
Yeah. It reminds me of the story in the Bible about Lazarus, where, Lazarus, they wanted to kill Lazarus and they wanted to kill Jesus, because Lazarus was the guy who was walking around, literally a walking testimony.
Yeah.
So to hear him talking about God is real, believe it. So when someone sees you, they're like, that's that guy, he got 2 cases, he's wild, and now he's the one preaching to us. Who does this guy think he is,
Right.
A couple questions, because I know, first off, between us guys, I feel like we got some crazy great clips, right? This is your Vlad interview right now. I want you to know right now, we're going to cut it like this. It's going to be your Vlad interview. This is incredible.
Yeah.
All right, so here's a question. I have like, I'm going to do like 4 more questions. First question, why the name YP? Because your real name is Hector, right?
Yes.
Why YP?
So the name, YP is an acronym for Young Paul, right? So it's YP, aka Young Paul. The reason why I combined the two names, the two, is because it's a unique name on the digital platforms. And every YP, aka Young Paul, I'm the only one. There's a bunch of YPs and there's a bunch of Young Pauls. So I was like, let me combine the two to make it unique, So, but the name Young Paul was given to me by my man Chova that I was telling you about, because I would always come back to the base, the church with my brothers or whatever, and I would share stories with them. Like, yo, I bumped into this dude I had problems with back in the day, man. You don't know what God did. Yo, I started preaching to him, and he started crying, and he hugged me. He was like, yo, I needed to hear that. So, like Paul, I wasn't, catching bodies and chopping people's heads off, but Paul was known to be violent. You know what I'm saying? And when God, transformed him, and he went back to his community, people, when they saw him, they thought that he was going to bring violence, and he was going to harm them. But when he opened his mouth, he started talking to them about Jesus, and it left them stunned. Like, you're talking to me about God? You were the one who hated him. And you were violent. You were killing people. So the core of that was like, when I approached people who I had issues with, they thought I was coming on with some static, you know what I'm saying? And I'm coming up to them like, yo, I just want to let you know, Jesus loves you. And they looking at me like, you talking to me about Jesus? What? You know what I'm saying? Like, they see me coming, and they're like, oh, I already know how this dude giving it up. We're about to get busy right now. And I'm coming up to them like, yo, listen, bro, listen, God bless. And there'll be time, like, there was one time, it was so funny. I'm with my man, Manny, and there's this kid I had beef with. He was like with 8 of his boys. They were walking up, and I tell my man, I'm like, yo, I'm going to go preach to him. He's like, you sure? There's only 2 of us here.
Oh, my God.
And I'm like, nah, yo, I just feel, led by God to go over there. And he was like, all right, I got your back. So I walked up to him. I remember I ran up to them. And they saw me. And I could see it in their face, like, oh, okay, we know what's going on. And I was like, yo, look, I'm not here for none of that. You know what I mean? But it's my job now to let y'all know about this Jesus that saved me and rescued me. This love that I feel right now, this peace right now, I know you're looking for that too, because I was right there where you was at. And you know how I gave it up, so this ain't no cap or nothing. And they'll look at me stunned, like what's going on right now? You know what I mean? And so that kept happening, you know what I mean? And then, like I just said, this one dude who I had issues with bumped into me. It was just me and him. And it was awkward because he thought that I was probably going to, run up on him. And I was like, yo, what up, my boy? You know what I'm saying? Look, man, I just want to let you know God loves you, Jesus. And he's looking at me like, what's going on? Like, Jesus loves me. He's like, yo, bro, me and you had issues. Like, what's that all about? I'm like, yo, listen, man. That's all dead, bro. You know what I mean? Like, and I just started preaching the gospel to him. And he hugged me. He started crying. Like, yo, I need what you got. And I think that these guys, even though they had issues with me, they know I wasn't no punk. So they respect that I'm coming at them that way. You know what I mean? Like if I was like a punk or a clown or nothing, they'll laugh at that. Like, nigga, get out of here. You don't want to get beat up right now.
Yeah.
But the fact that they know how I gave it up,
Yeah.
they respected it and they were like, I'll take that.
With the reputation.
Yeah, with the reputation.
Wow.
You know what I mean? They're like, all right, you know what? I know that that's real because I know how you know what I mean? So.
Yeah.
So when I would go back to the base and I'll tell my man, yo, I'm explaining all these stories. He's like, yo, you're like a Young Paul. You know what I'm saying? He's like, yo, that should be your rap name, Young Paul. And I was like, yo, I'm rapping. I'm rapping. Let's go. Let's run with it. And then my man Corey Hicks, shout out to my man Corey Hicks. He's from New Orleans.
Yep.
He's
I've seen the name somewhere.
Yeah, he's from the projects out there. He would always be like, yo, YP, what up, YP, what up, what up. And so that's how I was like, I like the spin of YP, you know what I mean? So I was like, I'm going to just combine the two.
Yeah.
So shout out to my man Corey Hicks for the
I love
that.
that. How many projects? So right now this is like a really dope project we worked on, and but how many projects have you? How many albums do you have before this? And then, you know, what was that like? Also making it. I feel like because you have to be a trendsetter to make what you make in this world, because there's not, you know, looking at the crates, be trap. You're sticking to like hip hop. It's gonna be authentic. It's gonna be gritty. How many projects do you have, and what was the process for you, even as a new believer, being like, all right, I'm gonna make some rap music?
Yeah. So, I started putting out mixtapes early 2000, like 2009, 2010. I started putting out mixtapes, and then the mixtapes at the time mixtapes were popping. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I was putting out mixtape after mixtape after mixtape. You know, sharpening my craft. Like me and Jimmy would talk about. Shout out to me and Jimmy in the cut over there. We were talking about it's like. A lot of artists, they don't put stuff out because they're waiting for it to be perfect. Yeah. And that'll never happen. Yeah. You're always gonna look back at your man. You know, I'm talking to a legend right here. You know what I'm saying?
I made a lot of mistakes.
So you go back to older stuff at the time was lit, but you go back now because you've evolved as an artist, you've grown, you've matured. You hear the old stuff like, oh man, that sounds kind of trash compared to what I do now. You know, but you put it out though. That is what helped build momentum. That is what helped got the wheel turning. Yeah. So that's the kind of mindset I went in there. It's like, yo, I'm gonna just put out these mixtapes. I'm gonna just be real about what I went through and talk about God and what He did in my life and put it on these beats and put a sound out there that I feel like, you know, needs to, you know, a sound that our era came up with. You feel what I'm saying? Yeah. With the mixtapes and the DJs hosting it. So I was just like having fun with it. You know, so I had DJs hosting it, Green Lantern. Like we used to listen to Green Lantern with Jada Kids.
Yeah,
you know
oh my gosh, yeah.
So I wanted to put out those type of tapes, and so I did that, and eventually the tapes turned into EPs when EPs started getting lit, and then, you know, so I got about, in total, I've probably put out over 30 projects now, 30, 40 projects, bro. Yeah. You know what I mean? Just mixtapes, EPs, you know, albums not as much, but a lot of mixtapes. Yeah. A lot of mixtapes.
Wow, yeah, he's like Papoose. Remember those days?
Yeah, shout out to Papoose.
12 every month, a new mixtape.
Yeah.
I was listening to him on the way here,
shout out to DJ K.
How important are mixtapes? You know, like nowadays, people don't understand how important it is. But like for us, that is how we got to hear anybody. You know, like you could download a mixtape. You really couldn't download albums. So it was like a weird time at one point. Right. You know, where you can go to like that Piff. Yeah, I was trying to think about that Piff was the spot for us. Yeah. How important or how influential was a mixtape, so that they can understand? Like, how important was a mixtape for someone to hear that growing up?
Yeah, mixtape was pretty much like a resume, low key, because you want to display like your skill level and rap over other people's beats and show that I'm capable to get on this beat and still do damage too, you know. And it's like I said, a resume or appetizer before like an album comes out. You know, you want to connect with the fans. You want them to hear this and enjoy it and hear the high level rapping and the cuts and the DJ, you know, shouting stuff in between records. You know, it just made it fun. And now it was like the bait. Now you got them as fans, like you give them like a real body of work, like an album, you know, where there's a theme from front to back. So it was like, you know, the mixtapes were like appetizers before the main entree.
And here's a fun fact, but every great artist has a good mixtape.
Oh,
they have a legendary. Like I think about the
Jada
Kisses. Even Drake has a mixtape. He's got 2 mixtapes that came out. He had the Comeback Kid and the one after that. Yeah. And you know, like there are, G Unit Radio.
Oh,
you know what I'm saying? Like, I used to love that. Papoose and you know.
Well, that's how 50 got popping.
Yeah.
Was through his mixtapes.
Yeah, that's right.
That's how 50 got popping, through the mixtapes, dissing everybody. You know, he got classic mixtapes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cassidy, that's how I got put onto Cassidy.
Kanye West had mixtape.
Kanye
I was listening to
West,
one
yeah.
on the way here. Yeah.
Drake's first project was
Yeah.
a mixtape.
Yeah, his first, the actual album that dropped where
Yeah.
he's like the little kid. That's
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
But even before that, he's a Dat Piff
Yeah,
exclusive.
yeah.
How crazy
J.
is
Cole,
that?
I got put
Yeah.
onto J. Cole through a mixtape.
Yeah. Friday Night Lights, was that the
Yeah,
mixtape? Yeah.
yeah.
So I love that you said it's like an appetizer because the album was like, hey, this is me in my element.
Yeah.
But the mixtape was like, I'm gonna show you like a rap before I
Right.
give you it.
Right.
So I feel like a piece of what I want also the listeners to know is that like, you know, there are elements of hip hop that still exist even if you are a Christian rapper.
That's
There's
right.
still the mixtape is very, very important.
Absolutely.
You know, like these elements matter
Absolutely.
to us.
Yeah.
And bars matter to us. People who don't have bars, they might get farther. But at a certain point where it's like, what are they talking about? You know, like
Right.
I always tell people when they're like, I hate, we'll probably take this out, but like a Travis Scott fan, I'm like, what's your favorite Travis Scott bar? And they're like, no, what is it?
Right,
but
right.
I can think of 100 Jay-Z bars right
Yeah,
now,
yeah,
or Jadakiss. You know, I
Yeah.
can think of 100.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the last question I want to ask you.
Yeah.
And this is even before the camera. So
And you got some classic mixtapes too.
yeah,
man.
Summer
Shout out to
George. Yeah, I
Social
got a couple
Club.
weird ones. Yeah.
Marty's being humble, but good. That's good. I'll praise you.
What's something for you? And this will be cut out. So what's something for you that you want to brag about that people don't know about you that maybe I missed? Like I want you to feel like, because number one, your stories, they're the things that are go viral.
Yeah.
But what is something that you are very proud about that you would maybe want me to ask or even to tell that we could like put as a clip as well? Is there anything about you or just personal life? What's going on? Like something that you're like personally, this is.
I feel like my Hector album didn't get, you know, the attention I feel like it should have gotten. And in that album, I feel like I share a lot of my real life story in there. I feel like it's a classic body of work, my best body of work that's out to date. And unfortunately, I feel like not enough people have heard it.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty much from front to back, just kind of sharing my story.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, glorifying God in it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's a proud moment because that's
Yeah.
is that your first like, all right, my first debut album?
I feel like, yeah, I would say that's my first debut album as far as like really, like, I put out an album called God Forgives too.
Yes.
That was probably my first album, but my Hector album, I feel like was more legit as far as the process. I'm in there with an actual team, we're following an actual theme.
That's like the best representation of you.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. That's like you and your. That's why I always feel like
Right.
this project I'm working on. Like,
Yeah.
this is the best.
Yeah.
You almost sometimes I think also as an artist you're trying to like put out things that you might know will work, but not necessarily you want to do because you're like,
yeah.
I know that this beat will work. It's almost like, you know, back in the day before Dipset, you know, to have a single, it was always like some club weird, and then Dipset comes up with Hey Ma, which felt authentic to them, but then it was a massive song.
Yeah.
So, you know, like that is your, if you have never heard of YP, that is the album that you'd be like, start
The
there.
Hector album, absolutely. The Hector
Start
album.
there.
Yeah.
How many tracks is on that album?
11.
Oh, 11 tracks.
records. Yeah.
What's your favorite song off that album? And why? Why is it your favorite too?
My favorite song will probably be House Party on 38th, only because I remember that night after that situation. So basically in that record, I described how, you know, me and a couple of my guys were in this crib, in this party, and, you know, the projects that we were across the street from, we had issues with them. There was some friction there. And there was also another crew in there that we had friction with, and they were there together, and we were outnumbered, you know, crazy, like 30 to 1. And, you know, we could have lost our lives, and we didn't. We got out of there, not unscathed, because my face was all banged up.
Oh, wow.
But we survived. And I remember that night, looking in the mirror, smoking an L. I had the bandana on, my face is all beat up, and I'm smoking an L, and my man's, you know, sitting there, and I'm like, yo, you know, like, yo, I'm tired of this, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like, there gotta be more than this, B. Like, I'm looking at my face, and I'm like, yo, this is like my life right now. It's all beat up. You know what I mean? I'm like, why? Like, I shouldn't be living like this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? My eyes, I have Timberland marks.
Oh my God.
You know what I mean? My lip is swollen, my eyes is on dubs, I can barely see. I'm smoking a blunt, and I'm just like, yo, like, we gotta do better. Like, I'm tired of this way of living.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's why that record probably to me, and The Chase.
Yeah.
The Chase is another one, where it's like vivid storytelling.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's not like a bouncy hook or whatever, not catchy record, but it's like raw and authentic, and it's like real stories.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
What's your now? This is probably the one that I'm getting in trouble, but it'll be the viral one too. All right, what are your So what are your 3 goated albums that represent you, like the influential albums that represented you, right? So something that you heard and you're like, I wish that I made this album. You know, like for me, just to give you 3 of them, I'd be like, you know, Kanye Graduation was big important to me. Like that's the first time hip hop for me like felt like that. And then another one for me was Faces by Mac Miller, because that's a total transformation of his brand. You know, he's now no longer goofy. He's like a rapper that's so like for me there are certain moments that mark like my favorite project. What are your top 3 projects that represent your history, your childhood, growing up?
So I'm gonna go Nas Illmatic, because you know Nas was talking about like him and his boys just being young and reckless and what he saw through the windows of his projects and all of that stuff, and you know I felt like I could connect with that because he was young. I think he was like 18 when he put that album out. So as a young dude, I could just connect with it, just the vibe. You know what I mean? And even if you hear his interviews, he said that he wrote that album thinking about his boys. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like I connect with him on that. Cameron, Come Home With Me. You know,
incredible.
And I think G Unit, 50, Get Rich or Die Trying.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
3 goated albums.
I think those 3 projects right there connect with me the most.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
You heard it here first. My brother, YP, aka
Yes,
Young Paul.
Yeah.
Thank you, man. And
Y'all, I appreciate you,
got it.
Marty, man. You already know, man.
God bless y'all.
Big salute, y'all.
So, all right, perfect. So, what I'm thinking is, you know.